Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. My name is Maurizio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Zaya Benazzo. We are the directors of the film Where Olive Trees Weep. And this is day 19 of us coming together and learning and listening and getting inspired to take stance and action in support of our Palestinians, brothers and sisters. So welcome back.
Yes, and we are speaking to you from the Ansville settler in the unceded territory of the coastal Miwok and South Pomo. Indigenous people known as Northern California, Sebastopol. So we want to introduce you today to, first to Daniel Maté, which is going to run this.
Two very special
guests. Very special
guests. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, Daniel.
Thank you so much. Thank you for offering to facilitate this conversation.
Yeah. So let me introduce Daniel. Daniel is an award-winning composer, lyricist, and playwright for musical theater. Outside of the art, Daniel runs the world-only mental chiropractic service, Take a Walk with Daniel. He co-authored the New York Times best-selling book, The Myth of Normal, Trauma, Illness, and Healing in a Toxic Culture with his father, Dr. Gabor Maté. The two Matés' next book is entitled Hello Again, A Fresh Start for Parents and Their Adult Children. But most and foremost, Daniel is a co-host of the world's most moral podcast, Bad Asbara.
How appropriate. I love the name.
Yeah. That's my latest venture, and I joined up with Matt Lieb, who's a comedian in Los Angeles who started the show, and I was a guest, and we hit it off so much that I ended up becoming a mostly full-time co-host. And yeah, every week we just try to digest and spit out whatever is coming at us from the Israeli PR machine. And you know, it's in a sense, it's weird to be making comedy in a time like this, but at the same time, the feedback we get from all kinds of people, including people in Palestine, and even some people in Israel, is that it's cathartic and homeopathic.
What takes people to listen?
Yeah, to laugh. So yeah, thank you. It's really my pleasure to be here. And like I said to you guys before we went on air, you know, you thanked me for being willing to do this. I said, interviewing Norman Finkelstein, I'd do that for a bad cause, never mind for a cause as good as this one. So here we are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess that it leaves it to me to introduce our next guest. I don't have a bio in front of me, so I'll just do this from the heart and from memory, from what I know. Norman is a hero. Norman is Professor Finkelstein, Norman, is a renegade and just a stalwart defender of facts and truth. And the title of this conversation was, we didn't choose it, but someone else, I think the folks at SAN named it, Beyond the Rhetoric, Standing in Integrity. And I can't think of anyone who's stood more in integrity for longer on this topic, particularly when everything material would incentivize against that. And that's, I think, the definition of integrity, than Norman Finkelstein. So Norman, pleasure to be coming at this with you from different parts of Brooklyn. How are you today? And thanks for doing this.
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So why don't we start with the title that was given to us just as a jumping off point, Beyond the Rhetoric, Standing in Integrity. What does that title evoke for you when it comes to the topic of Israel-Palestine in the moment we're in? What do those words suggest to you or bring up for you?
First of all, what's most needed now is clear analysis of what's going on and where things are headed. And what's least needed right now, not that it's ever needed, but certainly least needed right now is prophetic statements and rhetoric. There's things are moving simultaneously at a glacial pace and at lightning speed. Both facts are true. The kinds of change one might have hoped for, given the various arenas of resistance to what Israel is doing, be it the Houthis and the Hezbollah on one front and in one level, or the ICJ at another, the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court, another level in another arena, the UN organizations, the whole UN system really. The whole UN system is quite a fascinating thing to observe. The entire UN system, and that means all of its organizations, of which there are too many to count. The UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, the UN Undersecretary for Humanitarian and Emergency Affairs, UNICEF, Save the Children, World Health Organization, UNRWA. It's a vast apparatus, and this whole apparatus is united in support of the people of Gaza and against the Israeli genocide. So that's another whole area. And then there is the grassroots resistance, which was most salient in the spring with the student uprisings, the student revolts. Given all of that, one would wish the impact were greater than it has been. So things are moving at a glacial pace, though I don't believe it's correct to say that it hasn't accomplished anything. I believe that it's correct to say it's accomplished a lot, but it hasn't yet crossed the threshold where one can breathe a sigh of relief. So at one level, things are moving at a glacial pace, but at another level, every day there are new developments. It's very hard to keep up, even just with the written documentary record. It's impossible at this point. Every day there's a new 100, 200, 300-page single-space report that's coming out. And at some point, you just throw up your hands in despair and say, well, this is going to be superseded in about 1 week, so there's no point in even reading it. Navi Pillay released it's really 2-volume report on the situation in Gaza and in Israel on October 7th. And the first report on Israel on October 7th, I think it's about 70 pages, microscopic font, single-spaced. And then the one on Gaza is 130 pages, microscopic font, single-spaced. And then about a third of the topics she addresses in the report, she says, I will return to it when I give my report to the General Assembly. So that means there's another report, I think it's scheduled to be released in October. And that's going to render obsolete. So I usually read everything twice or 3 times. This time I left it at once because I said I was going to write about it because I had a lot of disappointment with that report or parts of the report. But then I said, in 2 months, there's going to be something twice this size coming out.
Yeah.
You have too much other stuff to do. So every day there are new developments. Right now, the talk of the town, as the New Yorker would put it, is an impending or possibly impending war with Hezbollah in the north, in northern Israel and southern Lebanon. So things move at a very rapid pace, and one needs clarity, I believe. And what's least useful at this point is, not that it's ever useful, but least useful at this point is vacuous rhetoric.
Yeah. And what about the integrity piece? I want to come back to rhetoric with my next question, but you've spoken about there being two orientations towards life, basically. One is the materialist concerns at the forefront. Let me get what I can get. Let me make my life as comfortable as I can make it. Let me look out for myself, which is an ordinary and, in and of itself, understandable human orientation. And then there's something to do with putting principles ahead. And many people look to you as a paragon of that second choice. In this moment, for you, what does integrity mean when it comes to standing with?
Integrity means one thing to me at this moment. I receive a large amount of email expressing gratitude for what I've done. And normally that would massage the ego. And for me, it just means strengthening the resolve. I've not done enough. I've got to do more and do more and do more. I've been working pretty hard. I'm working on esoteric topics because I think that they could possibly have an impact. And it's the kind of work that nobody likes to do. And I am willing to do, and to some extent, I like to do it. It's a kind of my leisure is devoted to watching British murder mysteries, and I like a good detective story. And so a lot of what I do is trying to figure out how people in positions of power manage to fabricate these falsehoods, which are then conveyed with a kind of flippancy, as if they're not hiding anything, but in fact they're hiding everything. And so it means going through a pile of dull legalese material and dissecting it. So there's this character, Joan Donoghue, who was the former president of the International Court of Justice. And as you know, on January 26th, 2024, the ICJ issued a statement in which it, as everybody understood it, it said that Israel was plausibly committing genocide. There didn't seem to be any dispute on that point.
No, Israel sure acted as if that's what they said. I mean, they tried to
Exactly.
claim that they didn't, but they reacted as if they had just been plausibly accused of genocide.
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And then on April 26th, Joan Donoghue, who's no longer the president of the court, her term of office came to the end. She went on this British BBC program called Hard Talk, and she said, "We never said Israel was plausibly committing genocide." I'm thinking, wait. I read that statement many times. For those who are interested, paragraph 54 is very clear in what you said. What are you talking about? And of course, that caused serious disruptions in the so-called narrative, a word I completely detest, because now you can claim the authority of the ex-president of the court, who actually presided over the statement by the court, what's called the order, saying that's not what Israel concluded. And I sat down, I read through the whole record, which is pretty extensive now because the ICJ met on the same case in February, then met in the same case in March 28th, met in the same case May 24th. There was the public sittings, and there were the written submissions. And I read through the whole record. I wrote a 22-page single-spaced analysis, and there was only one conclusion. The conclusion is that Joan Donoghue uttered a shameful and shameless lie. And right now that I've completed that, and by the persons in my reckoning who count, they conveyed that my case, I argued, was persuasive. I'm now on to this creature named Julia Sebutindi, the vice president.
Is that the Ugandan?
Yes, this creature from Uganda, who she's what you might call a bad stenographer for Israel. She's so over the top in her apologetics that it's become even a bit of an embarrassment, such that in the first meeting of the court, which was March 26th, there was the majority opinion, there were separate opinions, and Judge Barak from Israel, he wrote a separate opinion. And then there was only one dissent. The dissent was Julia Sebutindi, which we could mix a metaphor. She was more pious than the Pope. Barak did not issue a dissent, only her from the majority. Now, of course, you're entitled to issue a dissent. Everybody's entitled to that. The question is, how do you argue it? And she didn't argue. She didn't argue at all. She wrote 7 pages, single-spaced, which is large for a dissent. But she just repeated everything Israel said and never explained why she didn't agree with what the majority concluded and why she didn't agree with that phalanx of UN agencies and respected NGOs. I left out, I don't know if I mentioned, there's WHO, the World Health Organization, there's Save the Children, there is Oxfam. They're all united on this.
Yeah.
So why are they?
Norm, lest we get lost in the microscopic here. Clearly what you're describing there is not integrity. You wrote an entire book called I Accuse about Fatou Bensouda, previously of was it the ICJ or the ICC?
She was the chief prosecutor of the ICC.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't notice until you held up a copy of that book, the very clever, just the visual of I Accuse has ICC right there in the, it was just very, very clever branding, I have to say, Professor. But so integrity for you means not flinching and also not being satisfied or too gratified by the praise and gratitude you get, but rather pushing ahead and pushing forward. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take the conversation a slightly different direction, especially because the launching pad for this conversation is this film that was filmed in 2022, and it was filmed largely in the West Bank. And I know your focus has been on Gaza for a long time, but you also have a lot to say about the occupation more generally. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about, and if we could sort of summarize it concisely, that'd be great. The lifespan of this occupation. What was predictable from the start, and where have things gone in new or unpredictable directions? What has stayed the same? What has changed? What is the life? What is the, if you had to tell the story of this occupation from its inception to now in a rather simplistic way, or a rather simplified way? Because I think sometimes, because I grew up in a left-wing Zionist youth organization, despite the fact that I had an anti-Zionist father. It was a very strange choice he made to send us to Zionist summer camp, although I'm not mad at it. I learned a lot. I tend to have a certain kind of nostalgia for like the good old days when things were simpler or something like that, or when there was a peace movement in Israel, or so on and so forth. And in those cases, I can flatten or elide the ways in which everything has always been as brutal as it is now. And then there are ways in which the brutality does seem to have ramped up or gotten more somehow purified and laser focused. I wonder what you have to say about just the trajectory of the occupation. And let's start, for the purposes of this part of the conversation, in 1967. There are conversations also to have about what started in 48.
My own view is that if you look at the conquest of the American West in the United States, the sorts of justifications that were put forth for it, the kinds of tactics that were used in the course of the conquest of the West. I don't think on fundamental levels, at a fundamental level, it differs very much in practice or in its unfolding. Many moon ago, several decades ago, I sat down and I read through the history as it existed back then, wasn't extensive, of the Cherokee Indians, and compared it to the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories and this relentless juggernaut-like conquest of land, the breaking of treaties that were signed. It's actually a quite good book, accessible to a general reader. It wasn't written by an academic. It's called A Century of Dishonor by a woman named Helen Hunt Jackson, in which she describes this, as I said, relentless juggernaut-like process of moving west, signing treaties, making promises, breaking the promises, and continuing on the path. And I don't think it differs fundamentally from what happened in the case of the Israel-Palestine conflict. The one difference, I don't think it's a major difference, but it is a difference because of what happened to the Jews during World War II. There was a kind of moral persuasiveness to the case, which is not, didn't have that magnitude of moral persuasiveness in the case of the US conquest or the Euro-American conquest of the American West. Basically, the argument was, if I can just, let me reach for a book here.